great to be back at the Rancho Mirage Book Festival, and we're all here because all of us are Jamie Kabler's North Stars. He's been just such a brilliant enterprise ever since he was at Sun Valley and decided to come to the Valley here, and particularly to Rancho Mirage, and organize what's become like the Swallows at Capistrano. You know, every year we all come and we learn and we make new friends, and Jamie's one of those remarkable people. And I should also mention Elizabeth Sorensen. If we give a round of applause for his daughter, she does so much, always shows up here. And of course, Helene Galen, who we wouldn't be doing any of this without her, and her great support of the years for University of Southern California and the Galen Center. But, you know, Jamie really has a political career. He grew up and understood Washington, D.C. and Potomac fever at a very early age. He was in Alexandria, Virginia. He went to an Episcopal church school there and went on to the University of Virginia undergrad, and then went and did his law degree at the University of Virginia. He had an uncle who was a senator. He's had a relative who's a mayor. So he learned it all early, and he became the chief of protocol for Gerald Ford. And I don't want to make anybody feel older, but this is 50 years ago. Jamie was running around the White House working with President Ford, and also was the main inspiration for the Naval Observatory, for the home of vice presidents. He kind of established a new high water mark of what you can do with being a chief of protocol. And this, coming up in a few months, it'll be 50 years when Gerald Ford pulled America out of the Vietnam War. And Jamie was there for all of those crucial moments. I first came here to interview Gerald Ford in Rancho Mirage and got to know Jamie and like a group of our historians here, H.W. Brands and Jon Meacham, Doris Kearns Goodwin, many others. We come back and back and back. The one thing I'd like to point out about Jamie is his utter generosity to writers. He'll do things to help us. Most book festivals are very transactional. You show up, you do, you leave, and Jamie is about relationship building. So if we can all have a toast to Jamie Kabler, and thank you, Jamie, for bringing us together like you do. And I'm going to come on up, Jamie. I'm going to let him introduce what tonight's program is, but we really appreciate everything about you, my friend. I mean that. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And I'm very proud of the fact, Douglas, thank you. Douglas has been coming since almost year one, and his son's at USC, daughter at Pepperdine, and a daughter at Brown. But I want to recognize his wife, Ann Brinkley. Ann, will you stand and be recognized? One of the great people in my life. Ann, thank you. So this is our largest dinner. This is 700 people. And I want to say that our dinner co-chairs have been with us since day one. And I want to recognize Dr. Terry and Bart Ketover. Will you all stand and be recognized? Now, that Terry's in the white jacket with the black piping. If you have any questions about your seating, talk to Terry and give more money, okay? So this dinner started off very small thanks to two people. It was my daughter, Elizabeth Sorensen, who is a trustee of the Annenberg Foundation Trust, and the first president of the Annenberg Foundation Trust, Jeff Cowan. Now, Jeff is here tonight with a former vice mayor of Los Angeles, one of the great people, and that's Eileen Adams. So will you stand and be recognized, please? Thank you so much, Jeff and Eileen. And they're sitting with Rose Styron. And Rose gave me permission to say she's 96 years old. She comes every year from Martha's Vineyard. She's a noted poet. Her husband, Bill Styron, wrote Sophie's Choice and the Nat Turner Rebellion. Rose, would you stand and be recognized, please? Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. So the dinner outgrew Sunnyland. So where do you go? We went to Eisenhower, to the Helene Galen Auditorium and the Annenberg Health Sciences Center. And thanks to two people, Lori and Aubrey Surfling, the president of Eisenhower. I want them to be recognized and thank you. Where are they? Lori and Aubrey, please stand. There they are. Really, thank them. And Eisenhower supported us since day one. Thank you so much. So the Rancho Mirage Writers Festival has the two words that are really significant to us, and that's Rancho Mirage. And there's one person who created the structure of this foundation that made it part of the city, and he's here tonight, former Mayor Dana Hobart with his wife Vicki. Would you stand and be recognized? Thank you. Thank you, Dana. Thank you, Vicki. So I'm honored that the mayor of Rancho Mirage and his wife, Ted Weil and Jenny Weil, are angels, and the entire city council is here tonight. It's the best-run city in California. I'm going to ask the city council and your partners to all stand and be recognized. Please. Thank you. Thank you, city council. You know, everyone asks me, why don't you move the festival to a hotel and you can accommodate the 3,000 we have on our wait list? Well, we want to be at a library. We love the library. Now, we film all of our talks thanks to the generosity of Sherry Allen and Catherine Reed, who are here tonight. Will you stand and be recognized? Thank you so much. So millions of people from out of Mongolia to Mexico watch our videos thanks to them, okay? Now, for the third year in a row, we're honored to have the Lieutenant Governor of California, who's, wait a minute, the acting governor today, here, Eleni Kounalakis, with her husband, Marco. Thank you. Will you stand and be recognized? Yeah. Eleni, thank you. My daughter met them at Sunnylands and said, Dad, I'm in love with them, and we're all in love with you, Eleni. So this festival is because of my partner, Helene Galen. She believed in it. She wrote the first checks. She had the enthusiasm. And tonight she's represented by her two daughters, Dory Mostoff, her husband, Charles, and Nancy and Ross Goldstein, and her granddaughter, Katie Galen. Will you all stand to be recognized, please? Thank you. Thank you. And we have a local legend, Lucy Arnaz. Come on, Lucy. And Larry Luckenbill. Will you stand to be recognized? So the underwriters tonight include the treasurer of our board, Jan Salter, and Marion Rosenthal. Would you stand to be recognized, please? Marion, Jan, thank you. Now, as you all know, we had a security issue this year, and it threw me. And I called Miles Berger, who walked me through it and told me what we could do and how to handle it. And he's here tonight, director of our security, with his partner, Harriet Hockman, whose son, Nathan, is a new district attorney for the city of Los Angeles. Would you stand and be recognized, please? All right. I'm really honored. I want to point out a special person. Carl Rove comes every year. Carl is sitting with the speakers and the good friends. They share him. I love Carl. We thank you so much for your support and coming all this way, okay? One of my favorite literary lines is here tonight. The #1 columnist in America, Bret Stephens from the New York Times. Bret, please. And the author of more books than anybody in this room is Bill Brands and Julie Gold from Austin. Will you stand and be recognized? All right. Now, after the festival, we have speakers all year long, thanks to the generosity of Jordan Schnetzer. And Jordan is a noted philanthropist, art collector, and he's here tonight with his partner, Renata Barano. But I want to urge you, go to the Palm Springs Art Museum, see his show on David Hockney. Renata, Jordan, will you stand and be recognized? Thank you so much. And I want to thank all our friends here. You're all friends. And I work for you. I work for free. And I want to thank you for your support. And if you Jonathan Carl's here. Stand up, Jonathan. He's ABC. Come on. All right. Aren't we glad he's here? Wait a minute. Where is Frank Bruni? Frank, stand up. And there's Lawrence Wright. Okay. Max Boots, new biography on Reagan. Max, stand up. Okay. Jeffrey Toobin. Jeffrey, where's Jeffrey? CNN, come on. All right. So I want you all to give them a warm Rancho Mirage welcome because they come all this way to be here for you. And we're going to have an amazing week of conversation. And I want to remind you, next Monday, we have Bill Gates at 4 o'clock at the library. I bought 1,000 of his books. All of you are going to get his book. It's amazing. And he is going to be exclusively with us. And I'm so honored by that. So did I miss anybody? Did I miss it? All right. So tonight's program, we're honored to have Pulitzer Prize-winning presidential historian and just a legendary broadcaster. I'd like to welcome Jon Meacham and Brian Williams to our table. Hey.
Oh, sorry, yes. I want to know why you recognize Rove. Like he's the mayor or something. Jesus Christ.
Thank you. Thank you for your generosity. A friend of yours in the front row. I guess he paid extra.
That's right.
Heaven.
Jamie, I haven't been to an Episcopalian bar mitzvah in a long time.
Thank you for having us. Good evening, everyone. Thank you to all the angels. Thank you to all those special guests who were just introduced and forced at gunpoint to stand in front of this crowd. Frank Bruni, did you lose your luggage last night? Did I pass you at the air? It was not you at the lost luggage desk. I've been carrying around this for 24 hours. Oh, long-time fan, first-time caller. I went with the Michael Jackson socks tonight just to keep it wild, because we're in the desert. Welcome to what is the world's largest resort property, twice the size of Rhode Island. My wife and I are staying in a lovely place in Phoenix, and we left to come here, I guess it's 2 days ago now. You run into these families, some of them just traveling in wagons.
From your room.
Try to help them out.
From your room, yeah.
I said to one of the families yesterday, Westward Ho, and she said, "Who you calling a hoe?" And a little literary reference for you.
Yeah, we shouldn't let you out as
We've been
much.
friends for a long time. Here are my questions for tonight.
Yes.
And I say that because if I can't have a conversation with Jon, I don't deserve to be on this stage. I'm going to start with a quote from our mutual friend, Mr. Carville, who said quite controversially,
Will you do it with the accent?
in his view, Joe Biden would become the most tragic figure in modern American political history. You chose to work for Joe Biden, to assist Joe Biden out of principle. Mm-hmm. None of those of us who knew you were surprised. That gave you a certain internal view of the workings of that White House. I would love to know how many books are in the works right now on the workings of that White House. Yeah. Mr. Carville's point is, had Joe Biden in September of 23 just said, we've got the greatest bench as a party, let's mix this up, my job is done here, I came back to save democracy, he would have been carried out of Washington a victor instead of yesterday signing with CAA in Los Angeles to make some scratch. Yeah. So, however uncomfortable it is for you, and I don't know what, if anything, you are writing about that experience, take on the final year in office, what you saw.
Well, as you say, I'm not a Republican. I'm not a Democrat. I'm George H.W. Bush's biographer. I'm doing a project with George W. Bush. You can tell I look very radical. I have voted for as many Republicans for president as I have Democrats. So I'm very privileged in that I don't have particular policy passions. So and it turns out that people do. Who knew? So the Constitutional Caucus was sort of what I was volunteering for. I am not ideologically opposed in any way to the pre-President Trump Republican Party. And I say President Trump because one of the things that drove me craziest in the last 4 years was this creature that the right referred to as Biden. Biden. It was a diminishing and disrespectful way of addressing the president. And whatever you think about him, Joe Biden gave half a century of service to the country. And is this a tragic story? Yes, because it's a human story. The same forces and characteristics that drove him for more than 50 years, ultimately to the pinnacle of power, made him hold on too long. And it would be intellectually dishonest to say anything different. Self-evidently, he should not have sought re-election. But self-evidently, we're all fallen, frail, and fallible people. We've been doing this since the 3rd chapter of Genesis, right? There was a piece of fruit. We were told not to take it. We wanted it. We took it. We've been paying the price ever since. So I'm a big believer in judge not, because I don't want y'all judging me, trust me. So it would be a different story, I think. I'm not a big believer in the, if President Biden had stepped aside, there's no way they would have nominated Vice President Harris. I think that ignores the demographics of the Democratic Party and the traditional means by which nominees emerge. But part of the tragedy of this is now a conversation that we will have forever when we talk about President Biden. Biographically speaking, there are very few people in American politics who have had greater lows and greater highs. His life, when you think about it, is punctuated by virtually unimaginable tragedy and amazing temporal success. He didn't really have a 4th gear when you think about it, right? And so that will have to all be worked out. He's the last of a kind, ethnic Catholic, border state. If you draw a line from the southernmost part of Delaware, you hit Lynchburg, Virginia, Richmond, Virginia. So this is a figure who, the notion that he was a socialist who was somehow overly woke. I mean, he didn't know what woke meant. I remember Carl's former chieftain, President George W. Bush, heard that my son had been admitted to an Ivy League school, and he sweetly called. And I went to Sewanee, which is a combination of Downton Abbey and Deliverance. So it was a big thing. And so President Bush called. He said, "How you doing?" I said, "I'm fine, sir. How are you?" He said, "I'm fine." He said, "I heard the lad got into Harvard." I said, "Yes, sir, he did." He said, "You know what I think is going to happen?" I said, "No, sir, but I bet you're going to tell me." He said, "I think he's going to go up there and meet all those Wake people, and he's going to become conservative." And I said, "Wake? Like Wake Island? What is it? Wake? I said, "Do you mean woke?" "Yeah, waked. That's what I mean." And he did kind of. So I don't buy that, and I know that it's part of the articles of faith against President Biden. I know people think that people like me told him that he was going to be LBJ or Franklin Roosevelt. It's not true. I did think that becoming President of the United States on the 20th of January, 2021, given the fact that the Capitol had been stormed, we were in the grip of a global pandemic, there was immense distrust and disease afoot in the land, that it felt like 1933. That there was remember, one of the best-selling books of the decade was Anne Morrow Lindbergh, Charles Lindbergh's wife, who wrote The Wave of the Future. And in her view, the wave of the future was not democratic capitalism with its messiness, but a strongman-like totalitarian government. And the night FDR became president, like a good Episcopalian, he was having a glass of whiskey and going to bed. That's what we do, and there are only 6 of us left. Rex Tugwell, the brain truster, came to him and said, "Mr. President, if you solve the crisis of the Depression, you'll go down as our greatest president, but if you fail, you'll go down as our worst." And FDR looked at him and said, "If I fail, I'll go down as our last." He understood the stakes of the hour. And that was the analogy. It wasn't just making government big for the sake of making government big. I have no plans whatever to write about President Biden. My argument was this was my dork Peace Corps work. That's funny, I'll wait. Entirely voluntary. And I got into it because there's a wonderful piece, if you all don't know it, it's worth looking up. President Kennedy, in one of his great sort of passive-aggressive moments, made Arthur Schlesinger write an introduction to a book by Ted Sorensen. It's like making your children fight, right? And it was an introduction to a book called Decision Making in the White House. It was a series of lectures that Sorensen gave at Columbia, published in September of 1963, so right before Dallas. And in it, Schlesinger / Kennedy says, there's a myth about the presidency that it is the loneliest job. And in a wonderful phrase, Kennedy Schlesinger says, actually, no one on earth is subject to more clamorous counsel than the President of the United States. And my experience with him, because it was just a friendship, was that presidential candidates don't need a lot of opinions. They get plenty of those. And so if I thought there was something he should say about democracy or something, the one thing I can do quickly is I can write purple patriotic prose pretty fast. Evan and I trained doing that. Shortly after Gutenberg invented the press, we learned how to do it. And so I thought, well, here's what I'll do. This is what I would say. So I would sit down and type something and give it to him. So that's where this started.
Share with the folks what you shared with me in the green room about how you view the institution, the office of the presidency now. I was telling you that as I sit in my den in our home, you, I think, now have a full shelf.
Love that.
And all of our other friends.
You're young for my readers, so thank you.
But also there's books on the court on individual justice. Every biography of every American president ever, and increasingly I look at that shelf and I think it was all a waste.
Yeah, look, this has not been a cheerful season for institutionalists, right? And 49.9% of the country decided to do something different than what I thought they should do. The thing about democracy is you can't be for it only when you win, right? And so you didn't have a bunch of us storming a Capitol. I think that I've now spent almost 40 years writing about, I've been fortunate, as you have, to spend time with people who've held ultimate power in a nuclear age. the only two presidents of my lifetime I didn't get to spend time with were Nixon and Reagan, although I did get to know Mrs. Reagan.
Yeah, so did I.
As Jimmy Stewart said, if Ronnie'd married her the first time, he would have won an Academy Award, right?
She was a party, a very small party, but a party.
Yeah, no, in those hands,
She was a lot of fun.
I don't know if Max, you may agree or disagree, she scared me to death. I once, one of the great signs of, we'll get back to my psychiatric health in a minute, but one of the great signs of President Reagan's visual imagination is he improved on Jesus, right? So when he said shining city on a hill, you know, city on a hill is a phrase from the Sermon on the Mount in Matthew. And because, and Reagan used, and that was what John Winthrop used in the great sermon coming on the Arabella. But President Reagan called America shining city on a hill so often, and it's so powerful, that I have actually heard preachers from pulpits say, as Jesus said, America shall be as a shining city upon a hill. Now, how that sounded in the original Aramaic, I don't know. But I had just heard this, and I was coming out to have lunch with Mrs. Reagan. She ordered a third of a Cobb salad, and moved it around. And I said, and she always knew more gossip than I did, and I had nothing. So I said, you know, ma'am, I just heard a preacher say this. You know, it's remarkable. President Reagan improved on Jesus. And she said, oh, yes, that's the kind of thing Ronnie did. You know, may we all someday be loved as Nancy Davis loved Ronald Reagan. I have spent a lot of time writing about this office, revering this office, spending time with the people who had ultimate command of the capacity to destroy the world because of the card in their wallet. And whether you agree or disagree with the policy that emanates from President Trump's administration, I think it's safe to say that he does not conduct the office with the kind of dignity that even presidents with whom you might most violently and fundamentally disagree does. No, it's sad. There's no reason to applaud. It's really not. This is what the country wanted. They knew it. I don't know if once you break it, you can put it back together. But it's been a sad season.
That is the follow-up. Once you break it, can you put it back together? Right now, we're drinking from a fire hose.
Yeah.
3 hours ago, Trump said Gaza will be under U.S. ownership and control, and before walking out here, said it next to Bibi Netanyahu at the White House. Before walking out here, I saw an ad for Gaza Lago t-shirts being sold.
Yeah.
On social media.
Yeah, it's entertainment. I mean, that's where we are, right? It's entertainment with a big merchandising arm, except that he has the nuclear codes and apparently all of our data. So that's not great, I don't think. But I can bang on my high chair all I want. You know, I can, smash the Melba toast in the men's grill in fury about this. I can yell at my assisted living facility audiences about it, not y'all. Y'all are like American Bandstand compared to my, and the fact that you know what that is means probably we're pretty close to the other. When Jamie was going on, I was thinking, Burt Parks. It was great, right? There's a generational illusion. So I don't want to be reflexively snide, glib, anything else. At the same time, part of citizenship, part of the inside of the American experiment, was that in a world governed more often than not by our appetite and our ambition, we set about in the late 18th century to create an experiment in which reason and the life of the mind would at least have a fighting chance against our glands and our gut. That was the insight. And the most important sentence ever originally rendered in English, that all men are created equal, what Lincoln called an apple of gold and a picture of silver. Now that's a hyperbolic claim, I understand, the most important sentence, so I think it's true, although it is a little bit like, and Larry Wright and Carl are here, it is a little like the story about the Texas school board candidate who was against teaching Spanish in the public schools and said on the stump one day, if English was good enough for our Lord Jesus Christ, it's good enough for Texas. So there is that. There is that. I told W that when he was governor. He said, that's pretty funny, asshole. So we were very close. The American experiment is supposed to be about expanding the possibilities of the country, not constricting them. It's supposed to be about, if you'll stay with the metaphor for a moment, lending a hand, not simply clenching a fist. And at our best, that's what we've done. And that's not a partisan point. Think about what we remember about great eras in our history. Who here would not want to be with Frederick Douglass as opposed to Chief Justice Taney on Dred Scott, right? Who here would not want to be with Abraham Lincoln instead of the Confederacy? Who here wouldn't want to be with FDR and Churchill and not the Axis? Who would not want to be with John Robert Lewis and Hosea Williams and Andrew Young, as opposed to folks in my part of the country that were fighting against them? What's in common there? Those are dramatic examples. I understand that. But what the folks the people whose side we should want to be on were people who were devoted to fighting tyranny, not imposing it. And that includes Ronald Reagan, who brilliantly maneuvered us to victory in the Cold War. It includes George Herbert Walker Bush, who finished it without a shot being fired. It includes George W. Bush, who after the cataclysm of September 11th kept us safe for another 7.5 years. At a time, I was in New York with a pregnant wife on September 11th. If you had told us then that we would be all right the rest of the decade, you would have gotten a lot of skepticism. But he did it. And there's no theme there except people of goodwill trying to do the right thing. And there are not that many examples. As President Kennedy said, there's a reason Profiles in Courage is short and one volume, right? But if there's ever been an hour for it, this is it. And it's not just the Liz Cheneys. It's not just people. It is actually daily acts of citizenship, I believe. And let me just give you my one piece of advice. Almost everybody here has either been in the Senate or probably has a senator's phone number, right? And you don't have to admit it, but you probably do. Incentivize them when they do the right thing, because they live on this thing. They're, the most important American who ever lived probably was not a president, but was Steve Jobs. Think about it. Has anyone else ever, including Henry Ford, has anyone else ever affected how more people spend more time? I don't think so. They live on that. And so if someone has the guts to go against their particular base, let them know you appreciate it. And it seems small, but as Lincoln said, we all act on incentive.
Who would that be?
Who would who be?
Who is this mythical figure bucking the trend of his or her party?
Hey, everybody should call Mitch McConnell's office, right? I mean, I'm serious. I mean, look, this is not, we're not living in like, you know, C-SPAN meets Ben and me here. I mean, we're living in a moment, and I know there are people in the room who disagree with this, but I think this is fairly safe to say. We're living in a moment where an American president is strategically, you use the image about the fire hose, is strategically launching strike after strike in a way that has discombobulated the opposition, right? We don't have a loyal opposition in the country. We have a disoriented one. And so we have two choices, right? You either pick your fights or you give in. And I don't think giving in is an option. And I want to quote someone that is an important historical figure named John Belushi, who said in Animal House, "Did we give up when the Germans bombed Pearl Harbor?"
Hell no was the answer.
Hell no. Hell no.
I've got to back up.
You weren't waiting for, you didn't see Belushi coming, did you?
How do you process?
Brinkley got the last interview.
Your buddy 43 also went after the wrong country. And a lot of American families have never recovered from that decision.
Sure. Because we're an imperfect people. Abraham Lincoln wasn't for black citizenship. Franklin Roosevelt in this state rounded up loyal Japanese Americans. Until 5 minutes before I was born, my region was governed by apartheid. That's what history is.
Yep. Earl Warren believed in Korematsu on his deathbed, and my mother was born before women had the right to vote.
Yeah. Let's say we were here 100 years ago, which some of you were.
What did you do to him? You've been loving, you've been nothing but supportive. There's been some borderline material that you politely laughed at. And then to get attacked with ageism from this stage.
It's true, it's true, it's true.
You're not going to take home any of these centerpieces.
They would wilt by the time I get back to my room.
No, that's true.
Yeah. What's Eastward Ho?
Yeah. Who you calling a hoe?
There you go, baby. We're like the two old guys in the Muppet balcony.
You got to understand, I worked in cable. This is the most people in the audience I've ever had.
But let's say we were here 100 years ago, 1925. What would be going on in the country? All right, we would have just come through the Bolshevik Revolution, which created worldwide fears of socialist infiltration, ferocious anti-immigrant sentiment that led to the 1924 Restrictive Immigration Act that created national quotas so that we only took in people from countries who already had people here. The Ku Klux Klan was refounded on the Saturday after Thanksgiving in 1915. The flames from that cross went across America. 5 governors were members of the Klan 100 years ago, 10 senators, 30 members of the House. Governors of Texas and Georgia, but also the governors of Indiana, Colorado, and Oregon were members of the KKK 100 years ago. Okay. We would have just come through a global pandemic. In 1920, this federal census found that it was the first time we had more people living in cities than on farms. So demographic change, fear of immigration. We had a new technology called radio. If you were an American householder until 1924, which was when radio became broadly available commercially, you totally controlled the flow of information and culture into your house. You decided what magazines to read, what newspapers to read, where to go to church, what to check out of the library. Suddenly you buy this machine, you put it in the parlor, and there are these people in Hollywood and New York who can affect how your family experiences the world. Disorienting. And in my state, in Tennessee, in an attempt apparently to disprove Darwin, we outlawed Darwin. All right? And so, was that all? And women only had the right to vote starting in 1920. So was that great? We had tariffs. We had isolationism. We signed a pact outlawing war. Two of the signatories were Germany and Japan. That worked out well. So, you know, I'm not saying therefore things worked out in the past, so they're going to work out now. I'm not saying that. This is not a Mr. Rogers kind of thing. Although, a quick story about a very small category called great tweets. It's like French military victories in the 20th century. It won't take long. About 10 months ago, someone tweeted out that if Doris Goodwin and Mr. Rogers had had a one-night stand, I would have resulted. Which I thought was great. And Doris isn't here yet, is she? Doris was pissed off. So she learned how to use her cell phone. And she called, and she said, it's a true story, couldn't Mr. Rogers and I have fallen in love and you were the fruit of our union? I said, no, sweetheart, he picked you up in the C-SPAN bar. That's how this works. So I'm not saying that it's all going to work out. But I am saying that more often than not, as Wellington said of Waterloo, it is the damnedest close-run thing you ever saw in your life.
A question that it pains me to ask, is the middle dead in the United States?
I don't think so. I think I'm more worried about the center right, the middle right. President Trump is president largely because of probably 14.5, 15%.
I was going to say how much time we have.
Yeah, well, of 35% of the country, you can get to say anything, right? 35% was the number that still approved Joe McCarthy in 1955, right? So move that aside. Where did the 14.9% come from? Came from lots of different places, I understand that. But in 16 it came from, and we all know these people, and some of them are here, are people I call, you know, the Peter Millar Republicans, who, you understand, who can't vote for the other team. They just can't.
No.
They could not vote for Vice President Harris, and they couldn't vote for then Vice President Biden. And so they talked themselves into things, taxes and judges, you know.
Yep, tax policy.
And nobody I know in that caucus is poorer than they were 5 years ago, quite the opposite. But they have the franchise. I'm not being dismissive of their decision. I made a different one, but I just didn't think, I don't think this was worth the risk. That's where I was. I thought that Vice President Harris, whatever you think, would govern in a vernacular of power that we would understand. And one of the reasons she lost is because people like me think that that vernacular of power is okay. And there are a lot of people who don't. And there are a lot of people who want to break up that vernacular of power. And again, that's fine. I have a theory of the world, which I will inflict on you, which is that from one way to understand American politics from 1932 until 2017 is that we lived in a figurative debate between FDR and President Reagan. If you think about it for a second. Those were sort of the 20-yard lines, to switch metaphors. So FDR, President Truman, President Johnson are over here, President Reagan, George W. Bush are over here. Everybody else is pretty much in the middle, somewhere in between. President Ford, President Nixon would take it all in all, President Eisenhower, the first President Bush, President Clinton, President Obama. I've blown this theory, by the way, past 41 Clinton, 43 Obama, and President Biden, and they've agreed that basically they dealt with two big questions: the relative role of the state in the marketplace and the relative projection of force against commonly agreed upon foes and rivals. And so that was a coherent vernacular. And then in 2017, we have a president elected by the Republican Party who has a different view of Russia and a different view of trade policy and a different view of how you conduct yourself. And that's what the party has chosen to nominate twice, and it's what 3 times, and it's what the country has chosen twice.
How did Barack Obama ever get elected to 2 terms? Knowing what you know now about who and what we are politically, do you look back at that period and wonder if we were all doing ketamine?
Well, I was.
Well.
Yeah. It is amazing. I didn't think he'd win in 08. We went through this when we were covering it. I grew up in Chattanooga, Tennessee, right? I grew up on a Civil War battlefield. I could still find Civil War bullets when I was a kid.
Oh, they were your colleagues, in fairness.
Yeah, well, they were. They're my readers. And I just didn't think we would. And I always thought the first black president and the first female president would be Republicans, right? Sort of smuggle them through customs that way, right? And I still think I'm right about a woman. It surprised me. I think if General Powell had run, he probably would have won, I guess. But it is amazing. And a lot of it's a reaction, if not to President Obama himself, certainly to what he has come to represent, which is this shifting demography where people like me, we've only had about 12,000 years of being in charge. But a lot of folks who look like me are worried that we're not going to be in charge. And I don't think that that's the motive force, but I think it's a motive force.
A very prominent national Democrat who you and I both know, and I hate being coy, but I have to protect identities, told a very prominent broadcaster who you and I both know recently that apparently the lesson the Democrats drew from the first Trump presidency was how to gaslight. Evacuation from Afghanistan, the one I saw was beautiful. Economy, doing great, thank you very much. The border's really not a problem. Oh, and Biden, sharp as a tack in meetings. What do you make of that argument?
It works for the other side.
Well, talking about the Democrats
it does.
for now, but that they engaged in gaslighting with their constituents, with the voters in America, just as the other side taught them to.
Well, not very effectively. They weren't very good at it. I guess, I don't know. I don't think the president got above 42, 43% in approval. Is that about right?
And a 70% wrong track country.
Yeah, 70% wrong track. Look, people didn't like the country when President Biden was president. There's a little cognitive dissonance in that, but if you don't like cognitive dissonance, you shouldn't worry about politics, right? Because we carry these conflicting ideas around in our head. I don't think there's any doubt. Now, was it, if the party had been, again, I'm not a Democratic operative, so I don't know, but if the party had had some sort of honest inventory, would therefore that have carried the swing states? I don't know. I think one of the remarkable things, and this is from your part of your former life, the crack up of a common conversation, and this is a cliche, but there's a reason cliches are cliches, it's because they're largely true. But people don't wake up and want to learn about the world. People wake up and want to be reaffirmed in what they learned about the world yesterday.
Yeah.
And so people don't change their minds very much. And I think that's a real problem, because I don't know about y'all, but I'm wrong most of the time. I really am. And I like to think that if I can get, 2 or 3 things right, that's a heck of a good day. And I don't think I'm that different from people. But there is a polarized instinct. It makes things easier. at the moment, to paint this in rough caricature, there's an extraordinary number of folks who wake up and think that the kingdom of God has arrived, that President Trump embodies this remarkable new golden age, and therefore they interpret everything that unfolds through that prism. And then there are a lot of people who wake up who begin to set their hair on fire before they get to the Keurig. And I think, I wish more of us, meaning we the people, were somewhere in between that. Because I think the truth is not always in the middle, but it is sometimes. Let me ask you, I mean, do you think you went into the business in an era where you were, given the job you had, you were a source of authority? What you said on your broadcast when you started was part of a vernacular of common culture. You never said that's the way it is, but that was where you had to have him playing in the back of your mind, right?
Sure. Grew up in a Cronkite household.
Yeah.
Couldn't have dinner until he said those words.
Right. So when do you date the crack up of that consensus? Of an information consensus, not...
You mentioned it earlier. What Jobs has done, and I don't think we're there yet in putting our arms around it because the story is still unfolding, telling the world, oh no, this will be better if it's a conversation. We want to hear from all of you. Turns out we don't.
Yeah.
But they all have a data plan, and they're all on this thing, and people tonight are lining up to buy T-shirts that a drop shipper has decided to start producing today that say Gaza Lago, and this person will make a fortune of that, I'm sure. But this did it. This took our attention spans. One of my favorite things is to watch a baseball game, 1960s, 1970s. Home run gets hit, they're on it. Today, it's 2 moves. You look up from your phone, what just happened? Oh, there's the ball. It has changed American society in so many fundamental ways. And the algorithms. I follow some Russians who I know to be Russian funded just to know what they're pushing out at us every day. About 5 times a day, most of these sites put out material designed to make us feel terrible about our country. And my next question to you is, explain this new nihilism that is afoot. In effect, it's not working for me. Let's burn the whole goddamn thing down. People don't feel like they have skin in the game.
That's right, and that connects to what we were talking about before. And democracies don't work if you don't believe in the future, because you don't believe in the rule of law. If the only reason to believe in the rule of law is that you believe it will create opportunities for you, unless you're really a great person. But assuming that there's some people who aren't. You believe in the rule of law because there are institutions that protect your own capacity to build lives of prosperity, to pass something on to your children, that the society, that the culture is worth preserving. No democracy's ever worked without a middle class. No democracy's ever worked without a rule of law. The American Revolution, in many ways, was a product of the glorious revolution of 1688 and 89, where William and Mary come over, they accept the English Bill of Rights, where Parliament will be supreme. And part of what America is, or what we became and emerged in the late 18th century, was we were a political manifestation of a huge cultural movement, which I think starts with Gutenberg, that you have the invention of movable type, which democratizes information. You have the scientific revolution, the European Enlightenment, the Scottish moral enlightenment, the Protestant Reformations, the translation of sacred scripture into the vernacular, so that you move in the world from being vertical where popes and princes and prelates and kings were all given authority over all of us, either by a right of birth or an accident of election, the world is becoming more horizontal. That those institutions, of which that phone is part of the chain, was a shift in our perspective, that we didn't just look up and bow, we looked around and stood on our own. That's what democracy is. And if we fail to believe in it, because it is, a lot of this is magical thinking. You know, we haven't mentioned Montesquieu in at least 20 minutes. But there's a spirit of the law. Democracy works because we decide we want it to work. You can't write a law. Madison didn't want a Bill of Rights because he said, what if we leave something out? You can't write anything that's going to cover everything. And the price of ratification in Virginia was a Bill of Rights. And he finally gave in, but he worried because if you try to put everything on the letter of the law and you don't encourage a spirit of the law, and that's what we mean about these institutions and norms and all that. That when you break these up, you are feeding that nihilism. You're pushing people away from institutions that, for all of their faults, for all of their imperfections, have produced a country where our immigration issue is that people want to come here.
Final question.
Yeah.
I grew up in a nation where the future seemed limitless.
Yep.
John F. Kennedy, Rice University. Hey, I've got an idea. Let's go to the moon and land a man there before this decade is out. And in the summer of '69, we did. Hoover Dam, great idea. Crazy that we could pull it off. We did. Empire State Building went up in 13 months.
Yeah.
We're a 70% wrong track country. Is the notion of being limitless something we have outgrown?
I don't think so. I think to some extent, I think the election of 2024 was partly about people feeling that they wanted something bigger.
Greenland, Panama,
Yeah.
Gaza.
Look, all right, just so you all know, if it weren't for Tennesseans fighting the Mexican War, y'all'd still be part of Spain, right? So,
Maybe
right?
that's on the market. We don't know.
So I don't think so. I don't think that there's a dearth of a spirit of adventure. I think there's an excess of self-interest and a tendency, and it doesn't have to be permanent, but a tendency to put your own kind's interests ahead of everything else. And I'm not preaching about this. Maybe this is a good place, because there's a difference between patriotism and nationalism, right? Nationalism is a loyalty to and a supreme devotion to your own kind. Patriotism is devotion to a creed, to an idea. And the remarkable thing about the United States is that at our best, we have been patriotically loyal to the idea expressed in the Declaration that in the course of human events, we are held together and pushed forward by this notion that all of us have a limitless capacity. That only works if it works for everybody. If I don't value you, you're not going to value me. And let me give you my favorite story about this. It's about someone you've never heard of named Bennett McNichol. Okay? Bennett McNichol was a classmate of George Herbert Walker Bush's at Greenwich Country Day School in the 1930s. Bennett was a fairly rotund lad. He had not heard about Ozempic. He had not paid attention to Mrs. Obama's school lunch program. That's key to the story. President Bush was the best athlete in the school. He always won the annual obstacle course race at Greenwich Country Day. And his last year before he went off to Andover, the faculty came to him and said, would you give everybody else a head start and then go? And he said, sure. You know, whatever that voice would be at 14. And everybody goes off, and then Bush goes off. And he's going through a series of very narrow barrels on the playground. And he pops out, and he looks to his right, and Bennett McNichol is stuck in the barrel. Right, oh, it's a moment of maximum adolescent humiliation. You're the fat kid in the class, you're stuck in a barrel, Poppy Bush is looming over you. So what does Bush do? He reaches down, he pulls him out, he says, come on, Bennett, we'll finish this together. Biggest moment of Bennett McNichol's life, right? It's the kind of story that presidential families tell people like me to show how great their chieftain is, right? But here's the thing. I didn't hear it from a Bush. I heard it from a McNichol. The guy told the story for 70 years. So I heard it. And I went to see President Bush down in Houston. And I said, Mr. President, I just heard this story about Bennett McNichol. And he said, first thing the old man said was, Bennett, he loved lunch. I said, no, that's really not the point, Mr. President. He said, is he still big? I said, sir, let's focus. And I said, why did you pull him out of the barrel? Annoying biographer question. And the old man looked at me as if I were crazy. And he said this, well, I'd never been stuck in a barrel, but if I had been, I'd want somebody to pull me out. You know, you idiot, you know. But note what he didn't say. He didn't say, I pulled him out of the barrel because the Bible told me so. He didn't say, I pulled him out of the barrel because my mother made us do it. I pulled him out of the barrel because I'd never been stuck in a barrel, but if I had been, I'd want somebody to pull me out. He lent a hand because he someday might need a hand. That's democracy.
Your humble host feels especially like Bennett McNichol being in one room with so many of my own heroes. It is beyond me how I can call a guy like this my friend, but please join me in thanking my friend, Jon Meacham.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, my friend. Well done.